Good evening, folks. It's Diamond with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project and Magnetic Reversal News, bringing you a COVID-19 update Friday, May 22nd, around midnight 2020 Mountain Time. Now, we're doing this update because as the information pours in, well, more and more information is leaning towards the fact that this pandemic, is collapsing before their very lives. When will a COVID-19 vaccine be ready? I'm sure 80% of the population, the sheeple, they're lathering at the bit for this to be injected into their arm. And we'll get to that later, where we will actually show a paper coming out today, the scientific evidence and the efficacy of the most recent vaccine trial. And it does not look good in any sense of the way. What also doesn't look good is Deborah Birx. Now, this is an update she did today on the numbers. And you can see here, before we get to it, that the numbers are falling rapidly, almost to baseline. Look at this drop off here. Boom. Right down to baseline. These are the continental U.S. numbers. And like any good pandemic, the numbers drop off to almost zero, and then the vaccine is initiated, similar to polio. And then they say that the vaccine ended the pandemic, when in reality, the most viral infections end themselves in a downward trend, just like this. So I want you to take special note to Dr. Birx's, she's very nervous. She seems slightly unsure of her words, and it may be because she's lying directly to you.
So 42 states are now have less than 10% test positive on a rolling 7-day average. Now, again, I'm going to call your attention to the top 3 states.
Did you catch that? She's like, I don't even know what I'm saying. Let's do that again.
Now have less than 10% test positive on a rolling 7-day average. Now, again, I'm going to call your attention to the top 3 states, with the largest percent, and this is so you can all make your decisions about.
Another thing I want you to take note of is on her lip right here, this large herpes virus sore. And I just want to take note of that. That's a herpes simplex B right there on her lip. This is the lead infectious disease person on the planet, and she can't even deal with herpes simplex B. Okay, so let's go back to her nervous beginning and play it again.
So 42 states are now have less than 10% test positive on a rolling 7-day average.
Okay, so let's reiterate what she said. She said less than 10% of whatever. She doesn't even know what she's talking about on a rolling 7-day average. Another thing, she has no idea what she's talking about. So these are the experts. By the way, let's listen to her say it again. She's so unsure with her herpes simplex B right there. You can see it right there through the makeup. That she's about to stumble over her words because she has no idea what she's even saying.
So 42 states are now have less than 10% test positive on a rolling 7-day average. Now,
so let's go over what she just said. Less than 10% test positive of what? Of the numbers you allow to show? Less than 10% of who? Like, I mean, this is such a non-scientific approach to a pandemic, and they want you to buy this hook, line, and sinker. These people have no idea what they're talking about. Less than 10% have tested positive, and we only test a very small fraction of people because we barely have any tests, and most of them are crappy tests. So here's the facts I'm going to give you. Less than 10% of, I don't even know who, test positive, and then a 7-day rolling average of nonsense. We're going to show you this graph.
So 42 states are now have less than 10% test positive on a rolling 7-day average.
Yeah,
now,
I believe
again,
that.
I'm going to call your attention to the top 3 states.
All right, let's call
the
our
top 3
attention.
states with the largest percent in this.
So you top 3 states, it's all your fault. Okay? She's putting blame on you guys.
So you can all make your decisions about going outside and social distancing, potentially playing golf if you're very careful and you don't touch the flags and all of those issues, playing tennis with marked balls with just one other person, so you're only touching your ball. We found really people who enjoy...
Wait a minute. Mrs. Burks is about to say that people who enjoy sports should only touch their own balls. Is that what she just said?
One other person, so you're only touching your ball.
Yeah, she just said touch your own balls.
We found really people who enjoy sports have been able to
Yeah, people who enjoy sports have learned to touch their own balls.
Really adjust to social distancing, but you can see the top 3 states are Maryland, the District, and Virginia. And so there is still significant virus circulating here. That is...
So what she just said is the District of Columbia and the surrounding states, Maryland and Virginia, are the most infected. So the actual bureaucrats in White House are the most egregious perpetrators of spreading this virus. You pricks! I'm so glad I moved out of the East Coast. It's all your fault, Miss Burks. How dare you?
It's followed by Nebraska, Illinois because of Chicago, and what we've talked about before about Minnesota.
So Nebraska and Illinois, your outbreak is because of Chicago. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Burks. You're an expert.
So those are our top states as far as still having high number of test positives. When I say high number of test positives, they're all under 20%. If I had shown you this slide 4 weeks ago, half of the country would have been over 20%.
So what she means is that a few weeks ago, we didn't have any tests. So we were only testing people that were actually infected, and only 20% of the actual infected were infected. And today, we're testing everybody, and that's down to 10%, and our graph shows it, which is showing nothing. It means nothing, as well as my job and my career.
This also shows progress, but also very clearly about the region we're living in right now.
Yeah, the region we're living in right now, the United States, is controlled by multinational corporations and disinformation. And Dr. Burks is the top paid disinformation specialist. And she is so nervous at this point that she cannot even look at you, nor speak clearly or confidently like I am right now.
With disease. Next slide. Now I wanted you to see this as a metro because that's as a state level. So we look at this in
a metro. I just invented that word, so I feel more comfortable.
Multiple different ways. The number one metro with the highest.
The number one metro with the highest is, we're going to call you out. It's all your fault.
Positivity rate is the District of Columbia, which...
Whoa, that was Washington, D.C. Oh my God, it's President Trump's fault. Washington, D.C. must be infected. I think that's what she's alluding to.
Includes Northern Virginia and Maryland, Montgomery.
Oh, okay, so she's spreading it around. It's not just Washington, D.C., it's the outlying areas where everyone lives.
Montgomery County and PG County. That is followed by Baltimore, Chicago, and Minneapolis. And so these are the places where we have seen really a stalling or an increase of cases, as in Minneapolis. You can see all the other metros are almost all exclusively below 10%. So we see this as great progress across the board in the metro areas. Next slide.
Now, in my opinion, she seems very nervous still. This is just hours ago this morning, and she continues to be nervous throughout the interview.
Also look at daily cases and daily case numbers, and I know that you all know that that's a very erratic, and it depends on 10% test positive on look at this in multiple different ways. The number one metro with the highest positivity rate is the District of Columbia, and Minneapolis.
So I'm sorry I just screwed that up, but what I want to get to here is the fact that, well, let's just listen, and I will give you my synopsis at the end.
And so these are the places where we have seen really a stalling or an increase of cases, as in Minneapolis. You can see all the other metros are almost all exclusively below 10%. So we see this as great progress across the board in the metro areas. Next slide. So we also
I want to show you the blue line, this huge spike. This is New York. This is Governor Cuomo putting 6 people into old age homes and him killing actually tens of thousands of old people by improper protocol. He never even thought it through. He's going to send sick people to places where there are old people, the most vulnerable, to isolate them. What a stupid prick Cuomo is. He actually killed more people on the death count of the entire pandemic in the United States than anyone else in the world. Governor Cuomo should be held accountable for murdering all of your grandchildren. It's not you that aren't wearing face masks. You have nothing to do with it. Governors that are placing COVID-19 positive sick patients while they are shedding the disease, placing them inside the confined environment of an old age home where the medical staff gets paid minimum wage. What a great idea. So here's Cuomo's graph. Here's every other state's graph. You can see the difference clearly.
also look at daily cases and daily case numbers, and I know that you all know that that's a very erratic, and it depends sometimes on how the tests were reported, how the case were reported, and so you often have to look at over a 3 or 7 day period. This is looking at daily cases on a 7-day rolling average. You can see the number 1 at the top peak that has now come down dramatically is the New York metro area. Underneath that, you can see our concerns about Chicago and our concern in the yellow line of the Washington, D.C. area, because these are 2 areas that went through their logarithmic phase and are now at a high plateau with an unchanging number of cases day over day. That's the orange line and the yellow line. You can see that the daily case numbers per 100,000 are below the yellow line and the orange line of Washington, D.C. and Chicago. And that's New York and Boston.
All right, so we're just going to shut her off because now she's so confused. She's trying to convince you of stuff that they were trying to convince her of, and so on and so forth. When will a COVID-19 vaccine be ready? That's the big question. Well, why do we need it if everything is dropping off a cliff? We don't. Every other pandemic develops the vaccine after the pandemic is over. People have immunity now. Now, this came out today. Coronavirus vaccine developed in China shows promise after early study in 100 people. Pretty good case set. I have no idea who would volunteer for injecting this poison into their body, but they did. And so I went and got the paper and I vetted it. Now, this is not peer reviewed. It's currently being peer reviewed, but safety, tolerability, and immunogenicity of recombinant adenovirus type 5 vectored COVID-19 vaccine, a dose escalation, open label, non-randomized first in human trial. What they did was they took a general coronavirus or a cold vaccine that had been available. Did you know that? There was a cold vaccine available? I didn't either, because we don't need one. Anyway, except to make money for multinational corporations. And they added a little bit of COVID-19 to it. They shook it around. They shot it into 100 idiots that volunteered. Now, the methods, you can read them. The findings, that's what we're going to go through here. Now, people reporting on this study are saying it's a great news and it looks completely amazing. All these people had immune response to the vaccine and it's great. We've cured COVID-19. But the facts are quite different. Out of 27 or 30,000 individuals, they screened 195 for eligibility. Of them, they took 108 participants in this study. About 50-50 male-female. The mean average age was 36.3 years. Now, this is what gets me. None of these people had COVID-19. Who are these people that will volunteer to inject poison into them is anyone's guess. But kudos to these 108 schmucks that injected this poison directly into them. And kudos for them for what happened, because 81% of them had adverse effects. 81%. So let's go over this. Am I at the right spot here? Okay, let's get to the real data. So just bear with me as I go through the paper here and I find the data that we're looking for. Outcomes. So here it is. They analyzed all outcomes of the intention to treat cohort. The primary endpoints for safety was occurrence of adverse reactions within 7 days after vaccination. Okay, and the results, March 16th to March 27th, we screened 195 individuals. 108 were sequentially enrolled and assigned a low dose, 33%, a middle dose, 33%, and a high dose of the vaccine, 33%. The 85 vectored COVID-19 vaccine appendix is here. And if you can wade through it, what you're going to find is that, well, 81% of the 108 participants reported one adverse reaction within the first 7 days after vaccination. 81% reported an adverse reaction. And it doesn't matter if you got the low dose, the middle dose, or the high dose. Everyone had adverse reactions in the same percentage, 83% here in the low dose, 83% in the mid dose, and only 75% in the high dose group. No significant difference in overall number of adverse reactions occurred because 80% had adverse reactions, for goodness sakes. Now, these included pain at the injection point. Fever was reported in 50% of the participants. Fever. High fever was reported in some of the participants, and deadly fever was reported in 10% of the participants. 50% of the people that got this injection got sick. 80% got sick that got this injection. How is this helping you? That's what I want to know. Why wouldn't vitamin protocols and other nutraceuticals that could boost your immune system why aren't they being studied now? They have to have way better results than 81% adverse reactions. So no matter what you're going to get from the mainstream media, they're not going to tell you the facts. That 81% of the people that were given this had adverse reactions, joint pain. There was no significant difference in the indices of adverse reactions overall. That means everyone had them, 81%. So that's the study. That's the promising study for a vaccine for you and your family. 81% of you will either have pain and fever up to 104 degrees, and you'll be sick for a week. But it'll all be worth it because it will cure you from a disease that has no cure. And that's what they want you to believe. This is a coronavirus, folks. It's called the cold. Next year, it'll be different. The year after that, it'll be different. And so on and so forth. Facts, not fear. Plandemic, yes. Practice media distancing, please. I hope you got something out of the video. They are teaching you nonsense by pouring garbage and disinformation down your throat because no one has time to actually look at the paper. This study does show immunogenicity of the recombinant adenovirus type 585. Of course, you're going to get an immune response to a package of disease that you inject into a body. Of course, you're going to get an immune response. If I inject poison into you, do you know what you'll get? An immune response. This is not a celebratory moment for the efficacy of a vaccine. This is a celebratory moment for the multinational corporations that control the pharmaceuticals that they are now pumping into your body. If you think this is a good idea, You have lost all hope of critical thinking. You are a sheep with blinders on. You just want to go to work so you can retire and get that pension. And you have no idea the implications of this moving forward. Period. I do, and many of our listeners do as well. And we are slowly organizing, growing awareness together, and we will fight back. Trust me. And that's a boom. Share this with like-minded people. We love each and every one of you. Do this now. We don't have much time. I don't even have much advertising. That's why I'm up late. Because when I read this paper, I was disgusted. Period.